All right, aquatic biomes. Right here it tells you we categorize them based on salinity, how much salt there is or isn't in the water, the depth, how deep it is, and whether water flows or not. Okay, so streams and rivers move. Streams and rivers move, so there's constant movement, so that's going to already restrict some sort of producers from growing. Fresh water can originate from underground springs or runoff from rain or from snow melting from a mountaintop. Streams are typically narrow, so skinnier, smaller, carry relatively smaller amounts of water, whereas rivers are usually wider and carry larger amounts of water. But the distinction is arbitrary. So here's a picture of running water that looks like a stream. But I don't know, maybe those rocks are enormous, right? Lakes and ponds, standing freshwater, they don't move. That means you're going to have some producers there. Some of this water is going to be too deep to support emergent vegetation, so you won't have plants coming out because they can't, put their roots in if it's too deep, if there's no photosynthesis too deep. Lakes are larger than ponds, but there's no clear point at which a pond is considered large enough to be a lake. All right, so some zones that you want to study in your lakes and ponds. You have the littoral zone. So the shallow area of soil and water near the shore where the algae and the emergent plants grow. So that's going to be the water that's closest to the land. You might have some plants that have roots in the shallow parts, but you might just have a bunch of algae, a lot of photosynthesis going on that isn't plant-based. You have the limnetic zone, which is going to be, more towards, like right here, like the middle of your lakes or ponds. The way I think of it is, well, they both start with an L, so both of these regions are going to be lit up with light from the sun. So you're going to have photosynthesis throughout all of these parts. It's just that the littoral part is closer to the land, and the limnetic is further away from the land. Nonetheless, if you've got sunshine, you have photosynthesis. You won't have plants in the limnetic zone because their roots can't survive down there. They essentially drown too. They can't get oxygen from water like ocean things can, or lake things can. So you're going to have phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are little guys, little plankton, that are going to perform photosynthesis. Okay, and that's going to happen as deep as the sunlight can reach. Profundal zone is the deepest parts. It's dark. There's no photosynthesis. So no photosynthesis, no producers surviving there. No photosynthetic producers surviving there. And the benthic zone is going to be any part of your lake, whether it's really deep or whether it's closer to the shore. That's actually the bottom of the pond or the lake. So the lake floor. Wetlands, super important. Aquatic biomes submerged or saturated by water for at least part of the year. But the water is shallow enough so it's not too deep so that plants can still grow from it. So it supports emergent vegetation. Swamps, marshes, bogs. These are your freshwater wetlands. Swamps in general are your wetlands that are going to have the trees. So think of, the South, like Louisiana or something. You're going to have some trees in this freshwater. Marshes in general tend to be the ones that are have a lot of grass to them. Super productive. All of these are super productive. And then bogs, if you ever see a bog, it might look something like the one up here instead. They might have more nutrient-poor soils because they may lack some oxygen in the water, or at least they'll have lower levels of oxygen. And you might be able to smell the decomposing, the slower decomposition, if it still smells like decomposing, like it's decomposing, like sulfury, like rotten eggs. Salt marshes. So salt, meaning that it's not fresh water now, but it's still a marsh, so it's going to look real grassy, like your freshwater one will. The only distinction between the two is going to be that one's freshwater and one's salt water, meaning probably closer to the ocean, although not always 100%. Temperate climates contains non-woody emergent vegetation. So that's what distinguishes marshes from swamps, right? Swamps tend to have the trees. Marshes tend to have the luscious grass. One of the most productive biomes in the world, even though right here it looks like it looks like it's just grass. It's a lot of grass, a lot of different types of grass. Mangrove swamps. So swamps are going to tell me that I'm going to have trees, but this one's special because of the mangroves. Oops, I'm highlighting the wrong word. Because of the mangrove, this part. They're special mangrove trees. I'm just going to highlight it here. Salt tolerant. So they're near the coast, probably. Help protect the coastlines from erosion and storm damage. Remember, whenever you have wetlands at the coast, if there's storms, hurricanes, your wetlands tend to soak up all of that stormy water, and that tends to help the rest of the land tolerate that storm. So by the time it hits, where you live, the wetlands took most of that storm. All right, the intertidal zone, again, we're at the coast here. It's that little band at the coast where sometimes you've got the water, tides coming in, so there's a lot of water for a couple times a day, and tides leaving out a couple times a day. And those tides can be little waves, huge waves, crashing into the shore. So the organisms that live there have to be able to hold on. That's why you see a picture of a bunch of sea stars, things that can grasp, and not be washed away a few times a day. Coral reefs, you know your coral reefs, these gorgeous, colorful, biodiverse biomes. They're found in warm, shallow waters beyond the shoreline. Earth's most diverse marine biome. Even though coral reefs are found in water that is relatively poor in nutrients and food. Oh, let me explain that about your rainforest too. That just means that there's a lot of stuff living there. There's so much stuff living there that everyone around there is constantly grabbing the nutrients and food. But don't worry about that, because even though we're all constantly grabbing the nutrients and food, I'm pretending we're all fish in the coral reefs here, apparently. There's enough stuff that's dying and enough decomposition that's recycling so that this can constantly be happening. Okay? And coral reefs are important because, thanks to us humans again, the reefs are dying at huge rates. And we call that coral bleaching because the algae inside the coral dies. It leaves behind just the calcium carbonate shell of the coral itself. And so it looks white. It looks like just bones of coral. Scientists believe this is due to a combination of disease and environmental change. Let's add some stuff. For example, warming climates. It's too warm. And too much fertilizer. Too much human interference. That's just right. And human interference, such as too much fertilizers. We'll say synthetic fertilizers. Okay. Oh, and that reminds me, no. Open ocean. You've got this big, huge ocean. The depth that light can penetrate in the open ocean is dependent on the amount of sediment. So sediment, meaning the amount of land little bits that are going to be nutrient rich, and the algae that are in the water. We've got the photic zone. Photic sounds like photosynthesis. It's going to be the zone that receives enough light to allow photosynthesis to occur, which means photosynthesis will occur there. So you're going to have lots of productivity at the photic zone. But also at the photic zone, that's closest to the sediment. That's closest to the land. That's where you're going to have the most photosynthesis, because the sediment is what contains the nutrients that producers may need to grow. Nutrients, including nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur. Oh, I'm not done there. The aphotic zone means no photosynthesis. It's going to be deeper water, not enough light for photosynthesis. So there won't be any photosynthetic algae. There won't be phytoplankton there. Instead, what you might have is chemosynthesis, which is this process that occurs in the aphotic zone. Some species of bacteria, instead of photosynthesis, they will use methane and hydrogen sulfide that you find in deep sea vents to generate their ATP energy. So you don't have to worry about them.